On. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's been about a month, but we're here with some UFC DFS picks, lineup advice, strategies, best bets, you name it, for UFC this Saturday. Calvin Kattar, Giga Chikadze. You know me, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Jake the Snake, owner of MMADFS.com. Jake, hope you enjoyed your break, and I got to say, I'm pretty shocked that you actually got caught up and ahead of all the work that you wanted to do.
I mean, I wouldn't say all of the work, but I got caught up on UFC stuff. We just kind of let the rest of it slide by. But yeah, man, it was good to have a few weeks off. Got ahead on some big picture stuff. Did a recap of 2021. It was good. It was nice to get a few weeks off, and now we're right back in it.
Yeah, it's good to recharge and it's good to always take that time to reflect. And for those of you that are new, or if you haven't seen us in a month, well, we normally do these UFC videos when there are 12 fights or more, but we figured it's been so long, right? We have to do a video on the first slate back from break. So again, normally these videos are for 12 slates or more, or definitely for pay-per-view slates. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when we go live, upload any new videos. Jake, what do we got? Over 400,000 in combined UFC wins on DraftKings and FanDuel, right? Something like that.
Something pretty steep, man. You're definitely carrying a lot of that weight.
Well, it's combined, and so if you want the expertise on DFS and betting, you're at the right place. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when we go live, upload videos. Give us that thumbs up if you like the content and want to see more of this UFC types of breakdowns. And if you have any questions, comment on the video below. Gladly help you out. So, Jake, I figure this Giga Chikadze Calvin Kattar card. I mean, complete chaos from the time it was announced until basically today. And it's, fingers crossed, the chaos may not be over tomorrow. But we're down to 10 fights now. So I want to pick your brain really quickly on the two major aspects, especially on DraftKings, that make this card interesting. One is the fact that it is only 10 fights. Secondly is the fact that we have two incredibly mispriced fighters. Let's start with the 10 fight angle. You broke down all the trends during your break. Generally, what does 10 fights on a card for DFS mean for us?
So it looks like we had about seven of these last year. And basically, if you don't leave at least $800 of salary left over on DraftKings, you're going to have double digit splits. So we did see two unique winners last year. One of them left 47,000. I'm sorry, one of them spent 47,600 of the salary. The other one spent 48,500. So both of the unique winners last year left at least 1,500 left over. We also saw a split that was only a two-way split where they used 49,200. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're drawing the bar because everything above 49,200, they all had double-digit splits. And, I mean, maybe if you're playing one lineup, you don't care about splits. But if you're 150 maxing, then you definitely are very concerned with splits. You're going for the top prize. You're trying to get it unique. So, if you're 150 maxing, I would set the most salary you want to use is going to be 49,200.
All good stuff. Great info, Jake. If you like what Jake just talked about, again, his UFC 2021 review, a giant PDF with all these trends and basically lineup construction tips for DraftKings. Go check out Jake's Patreon, MMADFS.com, premium content. An incredible resource. Basically, all the work that he's done. I've contributed a little bit, I guess. And really all the tips you need to build profitable lineups on DraftKings. He did all the research for last year's fights. Incredible resource. Go check it out. Now, Jake, the other thing that makes this different, and the fact that we might want to even use even less salary on this slate, is that we have two mispriced fighters. And I'm going to bring up the model really quickly here. OccupyFantasy.com ranks every fighter, FanDuel, and DraftKings. We have TJ Brown, who was an underdog. His opponent dropped out. Charles Rosa steps in. TJ Brown is 7,100 on DraftKings, but he's a minus 265 favorite. And then if we look at Brian Kelleher, who was also an underdog, his opponent dropped out. Kevin Kroom steps in on short notice. And now Brian Kelleher is minus 295 at 7,500. So, occasionally we'll get one fighter like this, every so often. But Jake, the fact that we have two and only 10 fights, I mean, it's just a completely different type of slate that we're working with.
Yeah, man, this is crazy. I mean, literally, these guys should be priced at 9K. TJ Brown's like 2K underpriced. Kelleher's like 1,500 underpriced. So, I mean, we could absolutely see a new record here in terms of the least salary spent on DraftKings. So, the previous number had been 47,200. It would not be surprising at all if we saw the winner here, leaving 3, maybe even 4,000 salary left over, depending on, how like some of the fighters like Chikadze do. Like if if Kattar wins and we get, on top of the two mispriced guys, we get another 6,000 uh, priced fighter, sorry, winning, I mean, we could see a ton of salary left over. I mean, this could be absolutely nuts.
That's music to my ears. You know that. I love hearing that. So yeah, get weird with your lineups this week. And I mean, the ownership on these guys is crazy. What do you have for the two mispriced fighters and Giga right now?
So we have the two mispriced fighters right around 60% owned. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. They could fluctuate a little, but historically they've been kind of upwards of 60, 65%, sometimes a little bit lower, sometimes a little bit higher. Giga, we have just under 50% at the moment. And I think the main event's going to be interesting because most people before, I think, were kind of thinking, this could be a close fight. But with so much salary left over, it's going to be the people that want to spend the salary. It's going to be hard for them to talk themselves into playing Kattar. They're going to want to play Giga because they have the money to do it. So I think that's going to drive up Giga's ownership some. So originally, before we had the mispriced fighters, I had the ownership pretty even. And actually, at one point, Kattar was actually going to be higher owned. Since the mispriced fighters came in, we've seen Giga's ownership rise up to about 50%, Kattar in the mid to high 30s.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. We know the field's going to try to use salary whenever they can, right? No matter what the
Right.
dynamics are, they're going to try to use a salary. We'll see that here again on Saturday, and we'll see an insane number of lineups start with the two mispriced fighters and Giga, which again is very likely to hit. But if it doesn't hit, it knocks out a ton of the field. So Jake, just really quickly, let's talk about that main event. You're a noted Giga Chikadze hater in these streets. So, with a clear eye here, what do you see for this fight? And again, in the context of it being 10 fights, how do you see it playing out for DFS purposes?
So, in fairness, my critique of Giga was always that he hadn't fought anyone.
Yeah.
He's finally coming off the win over Barboza. I'll give him a little bit of respect. He looked good in that fight. So I mean, he's proving that he can compete with some of these better guys. But earlier in his career, he hadn't fought anybody, so I think that was a fair assessment. But anyways, we've got Giga the kickboxer against Kattar the boxer. So we're expecting, Giga's going to be throwing out blasting kicks the whole time. Kattar really, I mean, he'll throw some kicks, but he's really, really focused on boxing with his hands. Neither guy really grapples much, but it wouldn't be completely shocking if Kattar did look to grapple a little bit more. He just absorbed 9,000 significant strikes from Max Holloway. He hasn't fought in a year. Giga has no grappling. I mean, you have to imagine that. I mean, Kattar's not an idiot. He's probably going to come in, maybe look to grapple a little bit, but at the same time, we're expecting a stand-up battle. So Giga's going to want to keep the fight at range, keep it at kicking distance. Kattar will have to close that distance, walk through some kicks, try to keep Giga on his back foot. I think that Giga's style doesn't really lend itself towards a high volume brawl. I think he's going to be trying to kind of circle away from contact, throw out kicks, throw a lot of feints out there to keep Kattar at distance. So I don't think we see a crazy high volume fight. And then we look at neither guy has ever been knocked out. Neither guy has ever been knocked down since joining the UFC. So I mean, right there, it's going to be harder to get a finish just historically based on the stats. We're not expecting much grappling. So in terms of scoring, we're really just looking at striking and then hoping that, one of these guys can get the first knockdown against the other and potentially the first knockout of the other. But if that doesn't happen, I mean, this could absolutely end in, like a 90-ish point scoring DraftKings decision for the winner. So, I mean, I think that if it was a bigger slate, I would say that this is a fadeable main event. But on a smaller slate where we have fights like Jake Collier and Giga Chikadze, I think it's a lot harder for the main event to be left out, even if it does only score 90, 95 points for the winner.
Yeah,
so,
yep.
Man, I was definitely conflicted because I started writing up this fight, like a week and a half ago. We had, I believe, like 14, 15 fights at the time. And I was like, oh, yeah, we can totally fade this main event. And now we're down to 10 fights. It's really hard. It's really hard to fade this. So I think you want to. I mean, we talked about it earlier. I think it's a tough week for cash just because you're going to end up with like a 3x3 because everyone's going to play Kelleher, everyone's going to play Brown, everyone's going to play Chikadze. You don't have to stack the main event in cash because of that value. So then it's just like, which 8K guys are you going to play around that? Which, I mean, it just makes it a little bit trickier with cash because it's going to come down to one or two fights to decide who wins cash, which makes it a little bit higher risk, which is not where you're looking for in low risk contests.
Yeah,
But
it's the exact opposite, right? And I mean,
right,
basically, what we want to do in low risk contests, we want to make everyone else show us that they know what the good plays are. And when the three
right,
plays are so obvious, that takes away that aspect. And now we're just basically flipping coins for the final three spots. And that's really not where you want to get your money in.
totally. I mean, absolutely. Like, why would you want to play cash if it comes down to who scores more between like Brito and Holmes?
Right, exactly.
Like that's really not what you want in cash. So a little bit of a weird week for cash. If you feel really good about some of these like newcomers in the 8K range, I mean, I'm sure that Roy Bal is going to be popular, so I don't think that's where you're going to differentiate. So it's going to come down to some weird fighters, and you might as well just play high risk at that point. But
Yep.
in high risk, I still think there's a pretty good chance that the winner of the main event ends up in the winning DraftKings lineup, and especially on FanDuel. But I don't think they're going to lead the slate in scoring. So I think that's kind of my take in terms of like the scoring potential is that like we have a high floor, we don't have a high ceiling for both guys, and I don't know. We'll see if we get a finish, but I still sort of think this goes the distance. I think it's going to be a really close fight, but
Cool.
we'll see where that goes.
Sounds
But
good.
one thing that I just wanted to point out is that I don't, like you mentioned, I definitely don't think you can play Chikadze, Brown, and Kelleher in the same lineup in tournaments. Like
Yes.
I would definitely make a rule max two. I mean, if you want to get really high risk, I mean, max one of those.
Right. I mean, again, if you're playing the largest contests, you have to get different. Maybe smaller contests, smaller high risk contests. Maybe you can use two, maybe three if you get really different. But again, it's just so hard to differentiate once you start your lineup with those three. Now, you mentioned some of those newcomers really quickly. Let's discuss. Fortunately, you had 2 weeks to break down this slate, and fortunately, the late replacements were guys we already knew. We didn't have to break down any new fighters in 2 days' notice. So if we look at the three newcomers on the slate, we'll start with the biggest favorite, Barshev, Slava Barshev, kickboxer against Dakota Bush. We'll get to the other side of this matchup in a sec, but Jake, just really quickly, what's the profile look like on Barshev?
Yeah, so tons of kickboxing experience, like hundreds of kickboxing fights. Russian kickboxing champion, only has 6 MMA fights. He's 5-1. He's coming off a round 2 KO on the Contender Series. Really good striker. Doesn't offer anything in terms of grappling.
Cool. Good to know. Now we got two other guys to talk about. Joseph Holmes. He's checking in as a -150 favorite against Jamie Pickett. Joseph Holmes looks pretty good from a couple of angles. Jake, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off 7 straight finishes, all in the first 2 rounds. He hasn't really fought anybody, so we don't really know how he's going to look. He gets to step up in competition. He's a big guy. He's like 6'4", 80-inch reach, really big for the 185-pound division. Trains out of Glory MMA, which is always a bump. Like we love those guys, like training with James Krause. Like they're always well coached. It's interesting. He's a huge guy, but he's kind of a submission specialist. Most of his wins have come by submission. So, yeah, it's interesting. Like it's not what you would expect looking at him, but he's definitely looking to get fights to the ground. He is coming off a KO win, but it was sort of interesting. After the Contender Series, apparently Dana White basically told him, he's like, yeah, you have good submission skills, but I need to see your striking before I give you a contract. So then he goes into his next fight. He's like, all right, I have to get a knockout. And he knocks someone out. Like, again, not a very talented competitor. So I think that he's still going to be looking for submissions, but he was kind of forced to show his striking in his last match.
Interesting. Either way, we want the grappling for DFS purposes. So Joseph, if you're listening, change your game plan. Get the grappling more involved on Saturday. And the final, we have Brito, Joe Anderson Brito against Bill Algeo. What's the newcomer's outlook here, Jake?
Yeah, so he's coming on a 10-fight winning streak. 10 of his 12 career wins have come early, split between KOs and submissions. I was telling you early in the week, he really reminds me of Rafael Alves. Just really similar type guy, really jacked, really stout, like has to be a tough weight cut. He was really slow to weigh in today. Like he could definitely be fighting up at 155, and it's probably just his height that's keeping him down at 145. But he comes out super aggressive, and he has unsurprisingly has cardio issues late in fights. There was a fight a little bit ago where he couldn't even stand up after getting the finish. Like his corner was helping him put a shirt on. Like, I mean, the guy looked dead. I mean, he was
This is not the matchup for that, by the way.
Right. Yeah, now he's going against a guy with great cardio. So, he's a guy that could come out strong, look good for the first round and a half, and then fade late in the fight.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. So 3 newcomers. Let's keep that in mind as we're building lineups. Let's talk about a fight we want to target both sides of, Jake. I guess if I had to guess, I think your number one fight you'd want to target both sides of is probably Roy Val versus Bontarine, or is it the guy you try to convince me to make the cover of, who is both our favorite low-owned play of the slate?
Yeah, man, that's a close one. I mean, both of them are on my list. I've got three fights I'm looking at targeting. It's the Kelleher Kroom fight. I think that's going to be high paced. I think that especially considering their price, the winner's going to end up in the winning lineup. Definitely like targeting every Roy Val fight. I mean, again, super up tempo, super high paced. Finish or get finished type of mentality. I don't love Bontarin in this spot, but I still think anytime Roy Val fights, you have to play Royval and you have to bring it back with the guy he's fighting, just because if he does lose, the pace he is setting is going to force the other guy to score well if he does win. And then, of course, I mean, how could you not like Harry Bush versus Slava as a fight to target? I mean, this is great. I mean, Bush is an underdog. He's a round one finisher, and he's going against a guy making his UFC debut. I mean, that's probably my favorite fight to target, I guess I would say, but all three of those are great fights to target.
Absolutely. So Dakota Bush, more on that right now as we talk about our stream parlay of the week. Jake, I'll let you get to yours in a sec. We just talked about Bill Algeo and his cardio versus the newcomer. So I'll take Algeo decision, goes to decision, wins the decision, is my side of the stream parlay.
I think that's plus 320 on FanDuel. Is that right?
Sounds right. And we'll take the greater odds to start the new year.
Yeah, I know it's plus 250 some places, but you can definitely find it at plus 320. So yeah, I'm going Bush round one sub. I think he has a massive grappling advantage, man. Like Slava, pure kickboxer, no grappling. Bush, wrestling background. Historically, he's been kind of either get a finish in the first round or go to a decision. I mean, I love his chances as an underdog. You can get a plus 1,500. I think 6 of his 8 wins have come early. Really love that line. So if we parlay those two together, looks like we're looking at plus 66.20. Not too bad. $20 wins you $1,344.
Wow, we'll take it. I mean, let's start the new year with a win, right, and not be chasing our stream parlays for the rest of the year. How's that sound?
Oh man, that sounds great. Yeah, let's just start it off hot and then let's just burn through that cash the rest of the year.
Yeah, that sounds good. Speaking of Dakota Bush, right? So Jake has all this conviction on Dakota Bush. He texted me last week telling me to bet Dakota Bush whenever the lines come out. So again, Jake ahead of the game is a good thing for all of us. So Jake, let's hope for your sake, and honestly my sake and all our listeners' sake, that Dakota Bush gets this round one submission. Jake, any final thoughts on the slate before we get out of here?
I think you just need to be extra careful not to fall into these kind of like chalk builds. So I think a lot of rules are going to go out the window because we have so much weird stuff going on with pricing. But I think you really need to pay attention to ownership. And, like we talked about on the Occupy plug, you don't want to be playing, more than 2, max 3 high owned guys. But really, really don't fall into the trap of playing Kelleher, Brown, and Chikadze. That's going to be the fish move on the slate, so don't be that guy.
And don't come back and yell at us next week when it hits, because again, it's likely to hit. These dudes are all minus 250 or higher. But again, if you want to win the top prize, you want to get the collective 400K like we've earned over the last year. These are the steps we're telling you to take. So if you like what you listen to, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Click subscribe right below this video. Get notified when we go live, upload new videos. Go follow Jake. Read his work at MMADFS.com. Breaks down every fight, betting, DFS implications. Has the premium content on his Patreon, including all the breakdowns from the trends that won DraftKings GPPs last year. A couple of our wins are in there, noted. So go check it out. And what you see on the screen here now is the daily plug that Jake also writes for OccupyFantasy.com. Gives you a rundown, the best plays, low risk, high risk contests, lineup specific, contest specific lineup construction strategies, as well as Jake's best bets for the card. OccupyFantasy.com, link is in the description. Have any questions about the slate? Check us out on Discord. Click the join button below this video. Chat with us, other members of the OccupyFantasy.com community. Come sweat and or tilt the fights tomorrow night. So for Jake, at DFS_MMA on Twitter, I'm Brian, at BrianJesterFF. I'm from Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate you listening. Good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.